Before we begin with our official programming, we want to take a brief moment to respectfully acknowledge that Williams College stands on the ancestral homelands of the Stockbridge Munsee Mohicans, who are the indigenous peoples of the region now called Williamstown. Following tremendous hardship after being forced from their valued homelands, they continued as a sovereign tribal nation in Wisconsin, which and where they reside today. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors past and present as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. In recognition of our event today, pertaining to the creation of the LATS department, we as students commit to supporting other students of color and creating safer, more welcoming academic environments in this college for marginalized students. A robust liberal arts education is one that must include Asian American studies, Latinx, Africana, and indigenous studies.
Thank you everyone for joining us in discussion on the institutional battle to establish a Latinx studies concentration. Students in the early 1990s mobilized for the movement and organized 2 hunger strikes, one in 1991 and one in 1993 respectively. The 7 alumni before us today were involved in a 1993 hunger strike whose 30-year anniversary will be approaching next spring. Today, we invite you all to listen to how they experienced Williams as Latinas and how the historical events they lived through and how it impacted their relationship with the institution. We will have some time at the end of the panel for questions from the audience, but in the meantime, Lucia Rios, class of 2024, will moderate the discussion. In addition, we're also going to share a little short bio of each panelist.
And if you want to raise your hand as we introduce you so that the crowd can remember, Norma Lopez, she, her, ella, is an assistant professor of higher education at Loyola University, Chicago. Before entering the doctoral program, Norma worked for over 20 years in higher education, ranging from admissions at her own Williams College to residential life and academic advising at the University of Chicago. She serves as a bottom-line Chicago board member and hopes to continue to have an impact on the college trajectories of Chicago students through this work. Thank you, Norma.
Doctora. Teresa Rodriguez is a 1995 graduate of Williams College. We do have 2 Teresas. She grew up in a family of educators in the Boston area and has worked in public education for decades. At Williams, she was a history major with a concentration in women's studies. She is the youngest of 3 in a mixed Peruvian and Irish American family.
Tanya Nuñez is a lifelong educator who is known for continuing the needs of her scholars, families, and communities that she serves. Currently, she's in her 4th year as Assistant Superintendent of Democracy Prep Public Schools, acting as Managing Director of Middle Schools for the New York region, which serves 21 high schools. She's a passionate educator who is proud of her female Latinx roots and leads with this identity in mind. Thank you, Tanya.
Linda Ponce de Leon, she, her, ella, has dedicated her career in service of a future in which a child's success in school is not predetermined by any social or cultural factor. An educator at heart, Linda started her career in 1993 as a teacher. She is currently at the National Equity Project, NEP, and is the director of the NEP Building Equitable Learning Environments District Network, a cohort of school districts from across the country committed to more equitable approaches to teaching and learning in a partnership with BIPOC students. Linda has an EDM in Human Development and Psychology from Harvard Graduate School of Education and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Williams College. She was born and raised in Chicago by her parents who immigrated from Michoacan, Mexico. Linda currently lives in Chicago with her husband and daughter.
Our other Teresa Maturino Rodriguez, known as Tessie or Tess at Williams, is a class of 93 philosophy major. She's originally from Gonzales, California, and now resides in Manchester, Connecticut, where she has served as a public school educator for over 20 years. She loves spending time in spirituality, laughing with her husband, taking walks with her daughter, talking with her dad, and whenever she can, reading her books, in her words, con un trago de tequila.
Charlotte E. Neuhaus is a director, strategic planning at One Brooklyn Health System, where she provides strategic and project management support to implement the Kings County Healthcare Facility Transformation Program. Charlotte earned a Bachelor of Arts from Williams College and an MHS in Behavioral Sciences and Health Education from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. A lifelong New Yorker, Charlotte is a public health professional dedicated to supporting the attainment of optimal health and well-being for all. She is motivated due to her experiences visiting her Puerto Rican family in the municipality of Vega Baja and seeing so many lives cut short due to poverty and health inequality.
So thank you once again, and we invite you to reflect on the history, the past, the present, and ideas for the future in the Latinx community at Williams and at large. And now, without further ado, we'll present Lucia Rios, and you have the last word.
But before we do that, we do also want to introduce Leonora Dodge. She is also our seventh panelist for tonight. She is a proud Latina Chicana and deep roots in both Montreal and Mexico City. She chose Williams in part because it funded her trips to study abroad with Mi Gente, winter studies in Guatemala and Mexico, junior year abroad in Chile and Spain. After graduating with a Latin American Studies contract major in 1995, she earned a Fulbright to do research in Puebla, Mexico. She then completed a master's in Latin American history at the University of Texas in Austin and conducted research for a year in El Paso and Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua. Always grateful to Williams, she served on both the Young Alumni National Alumni Committee and on the Executive Committee for the Society of Alumni. When she moved to Northern Vermont, she switched gears from academia and lived by the personal is political, raising her children to be bilingual and working to build bridges between the majority white population in her state and Latinx families in the state. She ran Spanish language playgrounds and book clubs, organized Latino festivals, volunteered with Migrant Justice Justicia Migrante to empower Latino migrant workers in our dairy industry, and explained the political and social significance of reggaeton lyrics in her Zumba classes. And if you don't think there's a PhD there, listen to your Ivy Queens Loud podcast and talk to your professors. Today, she is running for state representative to bring Sabor y Sabiduría to the Vermont State House. The midterms are November 8th, and she sincerely hopes you are all voting. She is profoundly grateful for this opportunity to celebrate the hunger strike of 1993 and recalls that this was not a moment, it was a movement. And now Lucia Rios will be sharing questions with us.
Hello, thank you all for being here. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Lucia, you see her pronouns. I'm the historian on the board and I'm a junior. So first question. When you were a student, what were your expectations in Williams courses and overall life? Were there any courses including Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, or Latinos overall? And if so, from what perspectives?
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start off with question number one. Came to Williams in 1988, freshman year, and my expectations were what was always printed. Small classes, one-on-one attention, professors getting to know you, all the stuff that's probably true today, or I hope is true today. I came as a pre-med major, didn't end up with pre-med, but I think freshman year was really, really difficult, and my expectations were that of the storybook. I wanted it to be real, I wanted it to be true, but when I got here, I felt it was very different than what I expected. Freshman years, there are classes that are very large, so you do have so it's not a lot of seminar classes, there are a lot of just intro classes that you have to take. So that to me was different coming from, I am from Salinas, California, predominantly Mexican-American high school. I could have counted the number of black students on my hand, and I was of Caribbean descent in that. So you can imagine my experiences were a lot different. But I always call myself a Chicana Meña Riqueña because of where I grew up. Nevertheless, coming here, I saw myself as an other very quickly because I didn't have a lot of folks that related to me, and what we were learning in classes were just the canon that we were supposed to learn. So that was fine for a while, but it got really difficult as I continued in freshman year. Everything, the novelty is like real, like you want to like wet your feet and hands and everything in the beginning, and then by spring I was already feeling a sense of like questioning, do I really belong here? Was this the right move? What was I really expecting, and how do I reconcile that with myself? So took the traditional classes, all of the courses that you have to, and then a lot of science classes, right? I was pre-med, the math classes, and wanting to like expand a little bit more too. In terms of representation, there was very little. Williams had, I would say back then, a robust African American studies program, but that was it. It was after years of thinking through like what we needed to do and how we needed to like see ourselves show up. We did some work, we did some complaining, we did some lobbying, and we ended up getting Professor Scott Wong, I believe, who retired recently, and he did offer an immigration class. During our manifestations and our desire to want to have more classes, we did end up having Professor Renique come in, and he taught a Puerto Rican studies class. And we also had Gladys Jimenez Munoz that came, Professor Whalen, you may remember. And she taught a U.S. women's history, minorities history class. Yeah. Yes, and that was when I really started feeling like, yes, there are classes that I really want to take, but that took 3 years later. It was not an immediate like representation of seeing myself in classes. So we all have different experiences where we came from. Art history was one that hadn't touched on Mesoamerican art and things like that, but that was really about it. Anybody else want to take?
Oh, that's the second question. The next question is, how did students decide to take the step to do the hunger strike? Why did you decide to participate, and what were students demanding, and why?
So I was assigned that question.
Keeping our own timer.
That's, sorry. It's the teacher educator.
Okay, go ahead.
That's a big question. And I think you guys reworded it a little bit because I thought about it. And I'm thinking, how did we decide to take this step to do a hunger strike? So I'll tell you, imagine a movie, and I'm going to come right to that point. We had done a lot of things.
Hold that mic closer, girl.
I'm not good with mics. We had done a lot of things, and I think what makes you get in to make that big decision is a feeling. And I think if I'm right, and feel free to add, as I was thinking back about this, the feelings we had were that maybe deceived is a strong word, but maybe that's where we're feeling. I think a lack of trust in not being heard and not being seen. And we used to say, and people still say it, we're working with the system, right? We did what the system wanted us to do. But we weren't all doing it as we assumed that certain practices that should be in place weren't in place. So we did the talking. You guys have seen our document. If Linda can, you can do the little like prop. Yeah. We spent time at the MCC, now called, what's it called now? Davis Center. Night and day. Apparently I was like the driver to keep people writing and thinking, put the document together, but making sure we went to class, like we still had a responsibility and we were not going to let that go. We had the meeting with Professor Oakley, but still nothing happened. And so it's like, you're at this place, where are you at? But when you think back to that, at least for me, you bring with you your whole history. I was talking with a really nice student today, and she's saying how she can't always be herself, right? And we encourage her, be you. But I understand it's really hard at this age, right? You're kind of discovering who you are, you're fitting in. My history comes from California. It's funny, Tanya and I actually grew up in a similar area. Her mom worked at my school. We never met until we got here. But I come from the Cesar Chavez, hunger strikes, movements, so I grew up seeing people do that. So for me, here's one thing, if there's one thing I could leave with you is that everything is possible. Just because it's not being done, think about it differently. And that's when we say, okay, you have left us no other choice but to say, this is how important it is to us. And actually, as we were walking here, and thank you for the people who organized it, so considerate. You guys were talking about, like, been preparing us. Think about how you feel, how much are you comfortable sharing emotionally. And I'm like the one, like, I'll share whatever. But as we're walking here and I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh, God, I'm holding back, right? I feel that. And Linda and I had a conversation in this room, I think it was.
It was.
During the hunger strike, so it's probably our second, third day not eating. They organized a discussion between us and professors.
The whole faculty was in here.
Organized the chairs facing each other. It was like this is a feud. And Linda, we're all very close, right? But Linda and I were, especially particularly close then. And she's talking, and this professor gets up and says, this is coercion, blah, blah, and she practically faints. I mean, I'm like, I'm not gonna say the words that I want to say, right? So those are all the pieces where we were at emotionally. But to tell you very quickly, and I don't know if I have enough time. I'm gonna take enough time. And kind of synopsis how it happened. So I hear people still say, and this is a conversation for later. I had a conversation with Lucia right before I agreed to come. American Studies. For me personally, that's where the question started. I was like, what's American Studies? And I still have that question. And then when they told me, and I still don't think I understand, is that, well, there's no Latino studies. How can you have American Studies without Latino studies? And so when I still hear 30 years later, we're going to do American Studies and Latino Studies, I'm like, we still got work to do. Because it should be, in my opinion, that integral piece. And I could be wrong. Maybe American Studies does integrate in a certain way. But that's where the question started. Then we got Professor Renique, where we got Gloria Sanduel's book, Borderlands. Oh my God, we're like, someone who understands that, right? And that was a great course. And we were having ongoing meetings with professors that are going to try to have more courses that represented us. And Professor Renique was on the process for tenure-track. And then we thought it was like a positive, it's gonna work. And then they give us the no. Well, we're not people who just say, okay, right? So we said, we got together, like right away we got together at MCC. We said, what do we want to do? And we said, well, let's have meetings. I don't know if you guys remember this. Let's have meetings with different,
With all the faculty.
all the professors.
Yeah,
But
and
we
English
teamed-
and history.
We teamed up. I
Yeah,
remember like
we
two
went
or
two
three.
at a time.
And met with people. And I think I had, was it Robert Frost, Peter Frost? I'm thinking of
Peter,
poet.
he was the head of
Peter
history
Frost.
history.
Yeah, we had them.
Yeah. And I wanted to know what was the process, what did you do, how did you decide? And when we look at the work and blah, blah, blah. And I remember this very clearly. And I said, is that Professor Renique's book you have there? He says, yes. I said, it's still in the shrink wrap. I don't know how you looked at it. And that's when, for me, I was like, you guys are just lying to us. You never intended to do this. And I should have prefaced this. We speak very critically, but I love Williams, for many reasons. Williams gave me a lot, great educational experience, gave me this. This is like, there are no words for this. But at that moment, that's what I felt. And that's when we got organized. And that's when we wrote the papers. That's when we called the newspapers. Met with President Oakley. I met with President Oakley before we even started. I said, people are getting very upset. Oh, this happens every spring. Okay. We'll see, right? And so we got to that point where no había nada más que hacer. Cesar Chavez died in 93 too? I think it was the other thing. Cesar Chavez died in 93. And so we had done lots of things to come to this point. And that's when we said, this is what we are going to do because it means a lot to us. It wasn't like we said, we're going to have a hunger strike because we want a department. We just said, this is what we need. And that's when we had to have, I have a dear friend, if you guys ever meet him, Naveen Gedashankar, who was huge in also having other people support us. And I'm going to pause right there, as we could keep going. I'm going to pause right there.
I do want to add one thing to this question because the question is like, why did we decide to do this? One of the biggest reasons was we had quite a few Latino students here, and every year they would leave. They would leave by numbers. Like we lost most of our males. They would leave, and it was the reasons were like they didn't see themselves. They couldn't really understand how to survive at Williams. Like Tessie says, like we all love Williams for our own reasons, but we kept losing our people fast every year. And coupled with all of the things that we wanted to do, and that mere factor. So the 1991 hunger strike was 3 males. And it was because students Latino students kept leaving because they did not feel like they were represented here or that they belonged. And so that lasted like a quick day. And then that was 91, and 2 years later, we were still in that place where we were battling to make this a place where we could see ourselves and make sure that our studies was just as valued and valid. In American Studies is where I think Professor Wong actually had his course as well too. So that's a piece I did want to add.
I just want to quickly add that one of the really cool things about it was no coincidence that you were all about to graduate. And that should tell you that this was not something that was done out of, selfish, self-interest. This was done precisely because these incredible women are always thinking ahead, always thinking for you guys.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Moving on to the next question. Thank you. What was it like to participate in the hunger strike, and did you feel supported by your community? And were there those who expressed opposition to your position as well?
Oh, yeah.
Well, first of all, buenas tardes. And I just want to show deep appreciations to Lucia, Raquel, others, all the Vista organizers, and for all of you for coming and hearing a little bit about the story. I also want to acknowledge, and that Tessie mentioned Naveen, but I want to acknowledge we're here, and sometimes our names are the ones that are captured in the papers and things like that. But there was a lot more people that were part of, beyond, more than just Latino students. It was, and I think the reason that it was successful, it was because it was a united front, cross-racial, back then, and ethnic backgrounds. Back then it was the Minority Coalition is what they called it. But I really felt that we were supported by our Black brothers and sisters, all of them, Asian. The Asian community really was a big part of it. And so I just want to hold them here. They're not here, but I want to honor them. The other thing is, how did it feel to be a part of this? For me, it felt like I was something bigger than myself. I was a part of something bigger than myself. It wasn't really about myself, about me. It was and it wasn't. And I think that going to what Tanya was saying about what was happening in the history of Williams at the time is that Williams was getting better and better recruiting Latino students, students of color. They were doing okay there, but they were not addressing what do you do once the students come? How do you keep them? How do you ensure that they thrive, that they do well, that they contribute? And so that's where everybody was dropping out like flies. And for me, one of the things, and I was sharing this over dinner, is we always felt like I made a commitment to that.
Yeah.
I just made a commitment that nobody would drop out, like that we would support each other to continue and to graduate. And that's what we did. I was sharing that we were doing this hunger strike during finals. So I remember Teresa and Norma, they would go to the library, and back then you had to take out books to do your research paper. And we were like doing the hunger strike, trying to do our final study. They'd go do the go get those books for us at Sawyer Library, bring them over. We would make sure that we were all, that we were not falling asleep, that we were completing our papers, that we were studying. It was, and that's why, like 30 years later, we joke that we're comadres, we're hermanas, we're family. That experience really brought us together. But what I would say is I did feel very supported, particularly from students, certain students, and some professors as well. I also shared the anecdote. I was a psych major, and one of the professors on the final, one of the topics that we were studying, she integrated the hunger strike as a way to, that we had to write an essay about this particular concept. I don't even know what the concept was, but I remember in that moment really feeling seen. Like, yes, we're here. People are paying attention. But it wasn't all rosy. I shared this story too. We were in Baxter. maybe third, fourth day, I don't know what day of the strike, and the Republican Club or the conservative group, whatever, they sent us a whole pile of pizzas delivered to Baxter Hall, right in the middle of it. And so what happened, somebody right away took those pizzas and they took them upstairs to the dining hall and gave them out to the students or whatever. But so while some of us did stopped eating for 5 days, everybody played different roles. We all played different roles. And so I really felt like it was a united front. And it was just really powerful to be a part of something that I didn't really realize. I was looking through my archives, I go, wow, we were bold. I didn't even know that we were bold, like that I was doing something that was this, that was gonna be this fundamental. And I remember an article in the Boston Globe that said, Latino students at Williams move mountains, or the Purple Mountains or something like that. And I think about it now, I was like, it was a lot. So yes, we love Williams, and because we love Williams, we were pushing the institution to be better. We knew that it could be better, and we had something to say about that. We knew we had something to offer about how the college could grow. And I'll just share this one thing, because we had a conversation at dinner, and then I'll close. But Lucia was talking about her classes, and where's Dani and Danny, we were talking about the classes, and I honestly, that's a dream come true. It was only a dream. It was only imagining something, and now it's here. Like you all are living it. So that's really, I mean, that's everything. So yeah, I have no words about that. But when you were talking about what it means to take those classes, to be a part of the program, that's just what was in our imagination. That's what it would be for people, and it actually is. So that's.
And you
that's
thanked
huge.
us, but
We
thank you for taking advantage of those
yeah.
classes and being in them and having that opportunity to take those kinds of classes, because that is what we envisioned.
And the faculty.
Mm-hmm. And the faculty.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. As I shared before, this really means a lot to us, so thank you so much. Moving on to the next question. What was the outcome of the hunger strike, and how did students feel about the outcome? Were there any limitations from the college administration and that perhaps threatened the enrollment of participating Latinx students?
I would say we had some formal agreements with them. I remember signing a paper in Baxter Hall, and I want to shout out my sweet mate, Omu, and her daughter, who is a junior now, for sharing, Janu. We have a list, or there is a list in the archives, I think, and maybe you've seen it, of the number of students who participated, 30-something students. And I just remember looking at that list, talking about oh, Naveen, he was instrumental in making sure people felt that they knew they were part of a tradition of, trying to make change. And I don't remember all of the details, but I know that we were essentially trying to get some power within the decision-making to hire faculty, which is kind of fundamental to the college, right? Even the faculty want to be able to do that on their own. Not even the president wants to fight the faculty about that, really, to be honest. And so I know that we felt like we had something to offer in that process. And I want to mention those two same visiting professors that year. They really opened themselves up. They could have been people who said, I don't want to make waves. I want a job. This is a small industry. And they, I think, through their own generosity, said, well, this is a one-year position. We're just going to be open and honest with you. We did apply for the positions, and we did get, they didn't have to be quite as open with us. And I think that transparency helped enable us, because we felt like they were so valuable, and we knew that they had a lot to offer. And so I think part of the agreement was the number of faculty positions that would be added, and how, there was always this disagreement. Is it going to be an add-on? Is it going to be some takeaway from departments? And again, you're getting at fundamental things, the budget of the department, and who can join and be a colleague here. So I'm sure there is a paper of something that we signed, but I don't exactly remember. Linda can do her show and tell. And then I think we were worried a little bit about what would happen. I don't think anybody said you're going to get kicked out necessarily, but I think they were worried, I would say, not having to graduate that year. I think there was some fear, like, are they going to let us graduate? Are they going to let us walk? But I think one thing I just want to reflect on is, often how they say, like, Asian American studies here is not possible, apparently according to the current leadership of the school, is what we hear. As much as they're raising money for Asian American studies from alums and have asked people for money for that, I just think, well, it wasn't possible, all the things that happened with COVID, and then now they are possible. So I work in a public school where never was there money for every kid to have a Chromebook, and then all of a sudden, every kid has a Chromebook. You're like, oh, I guess the money was always there all along. There was just no will for it. And I think that's clearly the issue here with Asian American studies. There's no will for it in the university, or there's not will among the right people with power. And so it may be, oh yeah, mildly that would be nice, but if you're raising money and people have been asking for it and you have a population that supports the classes, the endowment of this university where I would say, I know I give every year just because I don't want them to say I didn't. It may not be the amount they'd want from me, but I just think the endowment of the school is that of a small country. And so there's definitely room to move things around, and looking at where they spend their money is important, but I think more people would join if there was that. I realize I'm very far off questions, and that's probably the way it is.
I would just say that from my experience, I know that in terms of the question I was assigned was number 6, but I'll just go into that, but it's fine, no, it's fine. I would just say that from my experience as a Afro-Latina, I felt Afro-Puerto Rican in particular, it was really important for me throughout my experience at Williams to connect with the Black Student Union to kind of not only dispel this kind of lack of understanding about that there are Latinos of all colors, and that there are Afro-Latinos throughout all of Latin America and throughout the Caribbean, and that we're here and we're strong and we've contributed a lot to Latino culture, and you wouldn't have salsa, you wouldn't have bachata and all of these other things, that's part of it. So, but back to, I think, in terms of the experience that I had leaving Williams, was that there were a lot of people who were very happy on the podium to see us go, and told us that. And I was like, and I was really, no, but I think it really tells me a lot about how, what it made me feel. Was like, wow, I came here as a student. I was 21 years old. I was 20, I had just turned 22. My parents are in the audience. My parents, of course, were like, don't go, why are you doing this? I don't understand this. They were conservative people. They, were working class people from New York. They're like, just go there, get your degree, and get out. But I just felt like, I feel that this school is built on, I was reading this over here, the Ephraim Williams placard, and how he gave money and he committed to building a schoolhouse. I think that's what it says. And I feel that we should demand those things from the school. I was telling, I think, Rachel, that I really care about Williams. I really feel very committed to the school. I do give money, maybe not a lot, but I do give money. I feel like I can give money to homeless shelters that need it, or to other places in New York City or other around the country, or to the ACLU. But I do try to give some money to Williams, but I feel that they made a commitment. I went to a magnet school in New York City called Townsend Harris. I was recruited. The first student who came here was from that high school, was in the class of '88. Holly, which you know, and then they came back and were like looking for Latino students to come to the school, and my teacher said, go to Williams, and I loved it. I was like, oh my God. I was gonna go to a SUNY school, which was not a bad school, they're wonderful, but I never heard of Williams College before. My parents didn't know about it. My parents were just happy that I would go to any undergraduate school. So the point I'm making is that I feel that in terms of commitment, and there is a reason that I'm kind of meandering around, but there is a reason for it, is that I feel that we have commitments that we make to each other. It's a quid pro quo. You brought me here.
Social contract.
Yeah, social contract. You brought me here. You supported me to come. I have the grades. You think I can do the work, the academic work, but you also need to support me, my growth as a person. You know, somebody was saying, well, why should you have U.S. Latino studies? You have French literature. Who's here? You know, you have Latin. You know, so if you can have those things, why can't you have U.S. Latino studies? And I would say that, so that's the first thing I would like to talk about. And then in terms of the Asian American Studies movement, and I would like to also add another group that was very influential, the LGBTQ were very influential and supported this, and we had LGBTQ Latinos, Latinx folks, then we had, you know, it was a real conglomeration of people who came together. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. That's okay. I can do it. It was a conglomeration of folks that came together and supported us. And so what I would say was, and that has continued, these lessons, not only do I have met I was telling someone that I met my closest friends throughout my life, 35 years later. These are my closest friends. But I also kept those issues, that burning, in terms of my career, in terms of my personal life, which is don't ever give up. We are connected to each other. And we are, you know, I was telling Leonora about this book, Cloud Atlas. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's this from womb to tomb. We are connected to each other. We are bound to each other as people. We're all human beings first and foremost. And so what I would just say is, in terms of the Asian American Studies Department, it's essential, and we have a commitment to helping them come to fruition and to get this program started, because Williams will use it in their marketing tools in 10 years. Just as they're doing now with the U.S. Latino Studies program and what they did with the BSU 20 years before that. They use it, and you see it all the time, and they love putting it in the Alumni magazine. So if they can do it they can use it for marketing, they can put some money on the table and make it happen.
Thank you so much again for sharing all of these experiences. They're really important, and we really appreciate y'all for being here again. Moving on to the next question. Looking back, what do you think you learned the most from the hunger strike? Did it impact you going forward? And if so, how did it impact you?
Hi, thank you. This is a really good question. And I think some of the stories that people have shared are really, were tough. Like for Linda to start to cry, that's a lot. Like this woman does not cry easily. I will tell you that. I was about to punch her and say, stop, because you're gonna make the rest of us cry. But the thing is that there were a lot of moments like that I would describe as like sucker punches from a place that had already sucker punched us a lot. Like there were a lot of times when we walked in a room and you felt that you didn't belong, that this was not a place for you. It was clearly not built for us. It was clearly not meant for us. That's all of higher education. But you had that constantly, that constant feeling. And then during the hunger strike, it was just magnified. So there was the pizzas. There was walking into this room, which Linda left out. The faculty were spread out all over. So they were all sitting in here, but they spread out so that we couldn't sit together. And I remember walking in that door and feeling sucker punched, because I was like, you bastards. You are trying to ambush us with this. I've never been so disappointed in a group of adults. I was like, we are still children. I'm sorry, we are college students, and you are adults, and this is how you're acting. And there were so many other stories like that. The pinche pendejo Frost, who's like, I'm usually asleep at 10 o'clock,
yes.
So I can't.
Can I say that my Irish grandmother was his cook for 30 years, which was like so, like my great aunt. So I just remember being like, this guy, He's been a jerk his whole life.
professor.
And I don't mean that personally. I just think like he grew up in this like very privileged world. Yeah.
So we asked him to come back. We were meeting with him in what is now Paresky, Baxter back then. And we said, we want to wrap this up, right? We haven't eaten in days. And they were like, okay, well, we have to go back and talk. And
his bedtime was.
and he said, I'm usually asleep at 10. And Leonora goes, I usually eat 3 meals a day. Thank you. So like, yeah.
I'm very food motivated.
So all of those times, what I learned is that we were stronger than we thought we were. Because there were so many times where it just hit you in your gut. And there was one night where Linda and I was sleeping in her room, and I said, Linda, what if tomorrow we don't eat? And she goes, we keep going. And I said, what if we don't eat the night after that, the day after that? She goes, we keep going. But that was like a really hard thing to think about in that moment. And so, you know, I think there were lots of times where it would have been nice to just go back to Chicago and let my dad like have his way and live at home and commute to UIC or wherever and not come back here again. But I learned that we could come back over and over again, and we could be strong and stronger than we thought we could be. And that was really important because after college, I think for a lot of us, it was hard to come back here. I decided to come back 3 months later and work here and live here and then leave and then come back again and work here and live here. And so I think going forward, it was a testament, and I won't say the word resilient because I have a lot of problems with that word. That means you've just overcome an obstacle and that's it. It was a testament to how much we could thrive, and that was what we did. But I didn't know that for a long time. I had a lot of imposter syndrome about having been here, and I struggled a lot with that and feeling like that was too hard. But I think all these classes really taught me that this was systemic. These issues were systemic, right? It wasn't me. I wasn't flawed. I wasn't deficient. And so the little bit of class that we got with Gladys and Enrique, like that gave me enough to know that this wasn't my problem. This wasn't a me problem. This was a you problem. And so I, you know, and that really, personally for me, it motivated me to go into student affairs. It motivated me to help students like I had been. It motivated me to then later do research. So now I do research on the experiences of Latinx students in higher ed. And so this has been a really, because once I realized that, I was like, these issues are systemic, and I want to understand how higher ed is the problem and not the students are the problem. So it's had a really lasting effect for me. I think about all the time the great experiences that you're getting with Carmen, before that, when Merida was here, with all the faculty who have been here, because we all need our consciousness raised. We need a critical consciousness to understand that that's our place in the system, that we are not the problem, but that the system was never built for us, and it's not making moves to support us. And so yeah, absolutely, the American studies is, what is it without the Latinos, without the Asian Americans? Like we need to include them in that narrative, African American studies, all those experiences for sure.
Thank you again so much. And I know we've been bringing up the current Asian American Studies movement that's going on. For this last question, what piece of advice would you give to future leaders trying to implement change around campus, in particular the Asian American Studies movement that has been going on for 34 years? Given your experience in fighting for the Latino Studies department, what piece of knowledge or advice would you give students currently involved in this movement?
So I would say that if you are upsetting administrators, upsetting faculty, and upsetting mainstream cis white male students at your campus. You're doing it right. I think that you, if you are collaborating with other BIPOC and queer populations on your campus, you're doing it right. If you are inspired by movements that start from love, you're doing it right.
I just think the last thing is like the school is doing a disservice to every single person if they're not offering courses that are the courses that include Asian American studies. Like, how are they going to create leaders in the country that don't have a fundamental understanding of where our labor movement came from? You can't understand labor without understanding Filipino Americans working in California, right? You can't understand the role that different groups have played. I just think it's not just for us to feel comfortable or for Asian American students, it's just quality education. So I guess that's where, like, Scott Wong taking that class, like, that's the one class where I was like, oh, I can actually have a major here. I understand this. Mm-hmm. Like, I'd taken a whole, like, first year of classes that I didn't really understand and I didn't really know, and I was like, okay, this thing, maybe I could get it, you know? Mm-hmm. So I just think the idea that, like, it took people years before having that to happen, I think just that idea that, the school's not doing it right if they're not offering a comprehensive understanding of the world and bringing things up that most likely most people didn't get to learn in high school, right? This is supposed to be a higher quality education. Remember when I was applying for college, I didn't get it. I was like, so what's the difference between X school and X school? And my sister finally sat down. She's like, you know how you take honors classes? I went to this very traditional high school. She's like, well, there's honors colleges. So you gotta go to honors college if you want. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. You know, like, no me dio cuenta. And so I think in that way, just at an honors college like Williams, they should have a high quality education that is comprehensive and doesn't leave out large swaths of people just because they haven't had political power to be able to demand it. So.
I would also say, speaking of power, I hope that no student ever does a hunger strike again, but don't underestimate your power as students. That's the advice I would give you is, I didn't think that we could do what we did. And so I would say don't underestimate the power that you do have as students and in numbers, right? Coming together and collaborating.
I wanted just to harken back to something that Linda said, which was that in terms of knowledge or advice, I think you cannot underscore, you cannot not value as much the connections with other people, other students within your community. So you have to, there are allies out there, and you gotta get those allies together, and you got to support. I remember Linda and I went to someone's home. I don't know if you remember that man's home. He was an activist. He and his wife, and they sat us down and they gave us a rule book, kind of like, this is what you should do. And this is what we did in the 60s. And I was like, okay. And it was very helpful. That's us today. Yeah, don't remind me. But anyway, but the kidding aside, it's just, and I think that's the first thing. And then the other piece, so I really think that we really need to break out of that and to say, oh, okay, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to help you with something, I can do film, I am really interested in, I want to be part of this, and they seem, that they're earnest and they want to do it, bring them in, because why not? Because you can't do it all by yourself. And that's what I learned from that experience. And I think in my jobs now, or in my career, I feel that I continue to tap into that. I said, okay, it's a team focus. You can feel, sometimes you get some accolades for yourself, but usually when you do any big project, it's a team focus, and it's really, that's the way you can succeed. The other thing I wanted just to say was about lip service. Williams is a wonderful school, but they know, they understand that there is a financial gain when they do things. And so we need to say to them, put your energy and time into it. This is the reason it's important. And I think usually people will come around, and I think they will see the value in having an Asian American Studies program. So I wouldn't take no for an answer or maybe. I would say, when is it going to happen? And you have to continue to press them until it happens. And I would say that these women here and lots of other people who are not here did that. You know, they kept pressing. They kept saying, this is where we want to put our money. This is where we want to, you want dollars from your alumni? This is where we want it to go. And you need to do that and continue to get folks to galvanize and focus on whatever the goal is. And so I think that's something that's important.
I think I'd just add a couple things here. Number one, my advice would be trust your gut. Allyship is extremely important, especially in the alumni, like your BIPOC alumni, like you all should be tapping us as well.
But shouldn't we just say we'll give double if they make an Asian American Studies class? Like, you just need to, like, I think there needs to be a very clear movement, which is every alum, would people agree that they would give double whatever they're giving now if they do that? Like, I think there needs to be clear, measurable, and get people, right? They're already raising money for it. But I just think, like,
Yep, and the third piece is just document, document, document. One of the things that I worried about in our senior year graduating was the students of color that were left behind, right? Where they were still working towards graduating and being strategic to make sure that they felt taken care of as well, and that they could still carry on the work in the way they best could in their own space and time at the moment too. So documenting, that's very technical, and I agree with Teresa, like there are more demanding things that you can do, but you also have to be ready for that and be strategic about it in terms like strategy, like you've been waiting 34 years, like we're behind folks, like there's no excuse at this point, but you also have to document so that people behind you know where it's been, how it's gone, and what else needs to happen.
So I've been thinking about this question a lot while you guys are talking. The one thing we can say about Williams, we get a really good education, really good. And it says here, future leaders. No, this is you right now. So one of the things that I remember for us was we were putting to use what Williams gave us, right? The writing, the arguments, philosophy major, right? So it was like, I'm using it not to, at the time it might have seemed to a lot of people, I'm trying to fight. I was trying to defend something. And if anything, I was trying to fight to, like you guys have said, make the school thrive, be better, be stronger. Look around you as well. So one of the things for me that stayed in my mind, that I was like, money, I knew Williams had money. We can do a lot more. I was impressed coming from my background to see what could be done here. When the hunger strike was two things that stayed in my mind. When the question about the outcome, as we were sitting in Baxter Hall, which I guess is not Baxter Hall anymore, Rescue Hall, they were the faculty that came out to support us. Professor Tandeka, is that her name? She in particular monitored, and she was very clear about something. As they asked us questions, what did we want? And then faculty would offer. And she would look back at us and say, is that what you're asking for, or is this something different? And the truth was, not only just the 4 days of not eating, but what do you want? Like you said, we were still in college, right? We had this vision, but we weren't exactly sure what that was. We just wanted to be represented. We wanted to have more professors that were going to represent studies about us and our people and the history. We wanted a history that was more, I'm going to say, and this is not the right word, accurate, because there's no really accurate history, but, different perspectives, let's say that. And that, she said, we are not leaving here until we actually listen to what they want. So I remember that was that one piece. A personal note about that, I remember Naveen and I were holding hands, because we were like, and when we were done, I was like, I'm done, I've graduated, right? Like, that was my piece. But then something else happened, and this often happened quickly, and that was, in my mind, I've always said that was the Williams that I went to and I believed in. They brought together consultants from Texas, professors from Texas, California, I don't know, where these professors came from, but they were from other professors who were having studies. And then they brought us together into a panel with them. We had a discussion. They were asking us questions because they knew more of what we were looking for. We had a vision, but we weren't clear on how to articulate that. And I was, to me, like, yes, this is the Williams I know. That when something can be done, you know how to mobilize yourself and invest in it in a professional way. So when you are here, it's not just what you have in your studies and in your books and your classes. I missed a lot of class because I like to spend time in the periodicals, and that's how I learned, and that's what motivated me, right? So use that time now to keep moving forward. I didn't think I would see, I guess we could call this the fruit of our labor, right? We were just hoping something better for the next generation, the way Cesar Chavez did for us and many other leaders did for us. But I remember, I guess it was what we call the quinceañera, the first time we got called to come speak with visa students. Honestly, like, I thought we were just going to have a luncheon in MCC, and we come in and there are microphones and things and with our names on it, and we're like, we're just regular people like you. You were just kids like you. But we wanted something, and we insisted. The difference is, and thank you, Lord, for bringing us all this combination together. You might notice even in how we respond to things, if you say something's going to be done a certain way, it's like, why? Why does it have to be done that way, right? We were chatting when you guys asked us to a panel, you said only 4. They're not going to, I was like, I don't think this is a group to say that to, you know? There's so many other ways we can do things. So many other ways. We don't have to have this. Even this forum, this poor man back there, he was hearing me out, he was like, why do we have to have these tables? We could have a circle. We could have discussion. We have to change things. Things can be different. There's nothing wrong with it. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to push. Have a lot of faith. And I always say this to Williams students, and do your work, because we did lose a lot of students because, no, we made sure we did our homework, you know. I was not going to use this as an excuse. I worked very hard. I worked very hard to get here. So do your homework, please.
Do your the mother. That's the mother in him.
I know I keep saying thank you, but thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you guys coming and sharing your experiences. You know, I know we were talking at dinner and, you know, brought me to tears, literally. But we do have, being conscious of time, we do have time for one question from the audience. We just ask that you guys enunciate your questions so that we can hear, and then I'll repeat it into the mic just for recording purposes. But if anyone wants to ask a question. Yes.
Yeah, so my name is Angela Mendieta. My family's from Bolivia and I'm first gen, so and I had a couple of, I see some of my classmates here were part of an archival studies course, and so we've been digging into the archives that Special Collections holds about the hunger strike 1991, 1993, and myself in the class. For documents. And I really, you know, I felt many emotions, but I was one of them, and another was seeing that there wasn't a lot of documentation of women. I wasn't seeing names of women on there. And so to come in and see a panel full of women, I knew they were there somewhere.
Whose names were on there? Anyway.
Well, the 91 was on.
Oh, 1991.
But, you know, of course, we wouldn't be a panel for women to show up and talk about it. I have many questions, but I guess I'll, you know, shorten it. It's a two-parter. One, I did see a document of Maria Bustos, who I think reached out to some civil relations. I was wondering if you guys knew about that or could talk about that. And second, one of the big things that stood out to me, one of kind of the shocking factors, was that there was a piece of paper attached to another, a scan of Marcela saying, "Do not grow out, must be digitized and recorded." And it was a scan of slips of paper that were found in Sawyer with slurs towards the Hispanic community, the LGBT community, the Black community, Jewish people, just everybody and anybody they could think of. And I also remember there was a detail about someone getting their Walkman and computer discs stolen. It's very hard to find more information about that. It's very hard to find names. What happened after that? I think there was one record. If you guys can talk about that, so know more about this story.
Just say real quickly, the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education called to see, and Maria Gosa was the spokesperson. She was a non-traditional woman, Puerto Rican, from North Adams, and she's in Florida now. We tried to get in touch with her for the panel, but have sort of lost touch. So she's someone who had a background in media literacy and videography and really wanted to document. And so I know that they had called just to say, you know, what's the basis of your action? And that was the Department of Education federally. So I don't remember that, but I don't know about the other details, everybody else.
I actually have a scan of it if you guys would like to see it. Because it was faculty. This is part February 1993.
Oh, that was.
So that was before.
Yeah.
But that was.
I mean, the people were nasty. That's fine.
But we also had stuff like in the daily.
I want to respond to your question about like kind of the reaction, because I think that it looks like the date on that is from before we ever did the hunger strike. But I think that it's important to know that, yeah, we got all kinds of very overt, attacks doing this. But I think the thing that was most shocking was the reaction from like white liberal professors, administrators, and peers. I did a study abroad program the year after the hunger strike. I went to Chile and Spain for the year. And on my Chile program, I became really close to this other Williams friend, who I didn't know at Williams very well. But, we had like traveled all over the Andes together and slept on trains and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, I don't know how it even came up, but we started talking about the hunger strike. And I was in tears. I was shaking because the reaction was like, well, honestly, I walked by Baxter and it was like, I don't know, you guys just looked like a bunch of, spoiled kids that were like, I'm just going to hold my breath until I get what I want.
That was a very common sentiment.
And my roommates, I had roommates that I had chosen to live with, who also were like, well, to be honest, like, I kind of wish that money would go into like hiring another econ prof. So like the overt stuff, I don't even remember that thing, but what I do remember is the stabbing in the heart from like the people that you think are gonna see you as an equal and as valuable and as reasonable. And when I then recounted to these friends all of the reasons, they were like, oh, now I get it. And then when they say, now I get it, their next knee-jerk reaction is, well, you should have explained that better. So that's why I'm like, we can tell Williams all they want, like, oh, it's so important to have Latino studies, or it's so important to have, yeah, exactly. So, I don't think that any of these studies programs, right, or any of these changes are going to take place a las buenas.
A las malas.
I hate to say it, right? Bottom-up movements are the only way that movements happen. Yeah, that's I think the most important lesson that I learned is that you take power. You are never going to be given power. It's never going to happen. Just like I keep grabbing this mic, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to agree and say that I had lived with a suite of women for 2 years, and it was really hard to come back to that and have them really not understand. And I stopped living with them after that year. And I always thought, now when I see them, I'm like, why did I stop living with them? But I will say that thankfully they changed, and over 27 years later, actually one of my, it happened before that, but the one that I had the hardest time with, she, during COVID, emailed me separately and said, I was not a good friend to you and I was not a good roommate to you. And that meant the world to me, so it's never too late. I was like, I really, really appreciate that you said that to me, because it was hard, and it was really hard to live with you and like you as my friend, but then to not have you support me. And when you have those kinds of friendships, you're like, I want to keep this friendship, but not if it doesn't, like, if it hurts me, then that's not a friendship, right? And so it was hard. We became distant, but I really appreciated at that time when she said, I was not a good roommate and I was not a good friend, and I'm sorry for that. And that's it. She left it at that.
And that just illustrates the importance of representation, right? It's not just window dressing. It is literally life-changing. If you do not have a diverse, diversity it really is not just about, like, having better food options, on Spring Street. Like, it is life or death decisions for people. And if there isn't somebody who has a different experience, that the issues that come to that experience will just never get met. And it's a vicious cycle of, because there's no representation, it's hard to get the decisions made. So,
And I just want to add that these classes are not just for us, they're for everyone. So why do you think that it's important? Oh, it's for the Latino students or for the Asian students, for the Black students. No, everyone should be taking these classes. Why not?
Yeah. I just want to say I can't provide any more info on this, but what I read on this paper seems very familiar to my own lived experience, especially my freshman year. And it just reminded me, it was like the very first day, I was in some orientation line, and I was talking to people behind me. They happened to be some people behind me. We were talking, and everybody's like, oh, what are you? That's so cool. You're Mexican. That's so cool. Things like, oh, my nanny is Mexican, or whatever. I eat at Taco Bell. These are real things. And one of the people said, oh, my friend did not get into Williams because you did, because of affirmative action.
yeah.
Oh,
That was the greeting day one. True
same.
story.
In my entry.
True
Same
story.
thing.
Shortly after that, I'm in another line, and I see Teresa. I'd never met her before, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I already felt like defeated and beaten up. And I see Teresa. I'm like, "Hi, do you want to be my friend?" And that was like, then we became friends. But so these things that are here, that it seems it's.
These are from the carols.
Yeah,
These were scratched into the carols of Sawyer Library. So in the basement, they used to have the monkey carols, so they were stacked, and I don't know if you've seen pictures of them, but they were stacked little cubbies that you could study in. And people would write everything, like gossip, so-and-so is hooking up with so-and-so.
Before internet.
But then they would write.
Snapchat.
Yeah, that was text messaging.
Pre-social media, yeah. But these were written in there, and then also they left notes in the bathroom. They left anti-Semitic notes, they left homophobic notes, nobody was spared. I do remember that happened, but I think that just brought us closer. I remember the Jewish students coming, and I was like, what are they doing here? And they're like, we're here to support you. And I was like,
That's
okay,
right.
come on in. I remember that. And they felt such a strong anti-Semitic sentiment in that moment that they came to Baxter and they were like, we're with you.
I just wanted to say one more thing that today, I'm sorry, Tanya, today at dinner, somebody was saying to us that it's still happening.
Yeah.
And I think that has to really be brought up to the highest levels of administration. That I'm like, really, 30 years later, 40 years later? I mean, Linda and I met, and then I moved out the next week. And the reason...
Because we met? No.
That was just a big No, I meant because my JA, she knows what I mean.
Yeah.
It's because my JA were looking at my parents.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's it. So I was like, I'm moving. And Linda was like, are you moving? I was
Black
like,
mother, white father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm not staying here. And so I left and I moved to East, which at the time was under freshman year. It really was for freshman year. But the point I'm making is that I feel like it really hurt me to know that you guys are still dealing with that today.
Probably more than ever with everything that's going on in the country.
It's telling of our time.
It's revealed, yeah.
I just remember, too, that there was other messaging at the time at Baxter Hall, Peresky. We had a daily advisor. So that was, you could get a sheet of paper that was put on every
Social
table.
media.
That was our social media. You could pay $1 and write messages You should have seen the
And
messages.
everybody gets to read the message.
Yeah, they're sitting on the tables.
So it would be like happy birthday, like that's the normal birthday,
Right.
right?
People would like send birthday greetings
Go
or,
softball team.
yes, just little announcements. But the stuff that came out when we were on the hunger strike, it was in line with what this document was.
There was one nice person who said, tell them how bad the food was.
Yes, tell them how bad the food is. And I could just share one experience. So I was on the softball team. And I was speaking to Chris Herman I think last year? No, 2 years ago. She had me come in to speak to the softball players. And she announced to all the players at the time that I was the first woman of color on the team. So I was like, oh yeah, I was. But that was really difficult too. Spring, senior year, hunger strike, championships.
Yeah.
I did not play because I was on the hunger strike. I had my priorities, like this is much more important to me. And I had a couple of softball mates come through to check on me in Baxter Hall, but really asked me, does that mean you're not going to play in the championship game with us? Because one of the reasons Williams was also interested in me was I was a big-time softball player in California, one of the pitchers, one of the shortstops. So I was playing in the game all the time, and I would not be. So that would mean that, we would cut our dreams short-lived. Luckily, we ended 4.5 days later. I still was able to play.
She's like,
but
I ate enough, let's go.
I ate first and did make the game, but it was those kind of things, right, that we had to go through. Are you really coming to check in on me, or are you just worried that you're not going to be in the game? We're not going to be able to play, and I'm someone that helps the team in that way. So it was real, and those DAs, daily advisor notes, were just really difficult to read. Like we weren't even in the hallways, but they would come back to us, and we would say, wow, our classmates really think this highly of us. So it was difficult.
Yeah, walking down the street or going from one building to the next, I just always felt like I had all eyes on me. And I always was wondering, like, what are they thinking? Are they a supporter? Are they this? Are they that? And so it's a lot of, a lot of pressure. But.
And I remember we even had professors kind of, I think that there was so much, they were so nervous about what our next move might be, which was so ridiculous because we were 20-year-olds. And I remember them inviting me and I don't know who else came to dinner, but just like the Orchards or somewhere fancy that I've never set foot there since then. I don't even know. But a professor invited us out to eat, and then we were just like, oh, they want to check in on us. And they just started asking all these questions about oh, so who else is involved and who's writing? And they were worried about getting out to the media and whether we were going to get violent or it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking that that's what they thought of us, and here we were reading Gandhi,
Yeah.
literally being so disciplined, right? So disciplined, doing our homework, making sure everybody did their homework. We were just being kick-ass students. And they just didn't expect that of us. They truly, they were shocked that that's what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
It really hurt.
I'm in fairness, we did want to take over a building. Not gonna
But we
lie.
didn't. I remember that was one of the discussions, because that's how the MCC was
strategic.
built. That
We
was how the
decided
MCC
not to do it.
No,
Because then they would
because
just
of
arrest you.
Naveen. Because of Naveen.
Navi,
We were like,
No, Tessie, am I right?
discipline. Navi?
Naveen inspired us. Naveen was like,
but
Gandhi
your
and
sister
Phil-
had taken over a building over
Yeah.
at Brown, and you said, oh, they just arrested them, so we shouldn't do that. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true.
That
We
is
should
true.
But
do it.
much
Navi
beyond.
influenced.
No, but
That true story.
No, I remember the whole conversation.
yeah, but much beyond, strategically in terms of you'll get arrested or whatever. Naveen's,
Yeah.
the framing of the entire hunger strike
Yeah.
was that you have to humanize. And because we were being so othered that we were we have basic needs just like you. And this is hurting us to the same degree that it would hurt you not to eat. We're going to take on that pain and in a way that you can all relate to, because you obviously can't relate to feeling othered. So, but let's show you what it feels like to not eat for days. And that's what I mean by, you know, that it was a spiritual experience, not to get woo-woo-y on you.
But I think I was going to just say to you, just to interrupt you, but just to say that I would say that it also was based on having Cesar Chavez just here.
Yeah.
2 years, was it 2 years before that, or in 19?
I don't know what you mentioned.
Cesar Chavez came to campus, and he spoke about his experiences. So I think we built on that history of activism. There was activism with the Black Student Union in the 80s, and we learned about it. And some of those students were still here when I entered freshman year, or first year. I was a first year student. So I think those experiences were shared across the board with us. And then, and we learned about this. So I think in some ways, we got all of the learning that we did, and the teaching and the political activism, and we learned all of these things. And many of our professors some of them did activism themselves. So I just feel like that, it was but you're right, it was surprising, because many of the same people who they did Vietnam War, protests, they were the same people. They didn't get it. No. When it came to them being on the other side, they didn't want to hear it.
Yeah. I don't think we answered the question.
Well, we don't really have a lot more to,
Okay.
We have to wrap it up.
So,
Lucia's there. Go ahead.
do you
Go
want
ahead, get
to
in
wrap it
there.
up for us? Do you want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Please. Thank you again so much, and thank all of y'all for being here. Before we close out, we are going to hear some closing remarks from Professor Carmen Whalen, who is the chair of the Department of the Latino Studies.
This has been so amazingly wonderful, and I have to laugh. They may have been some people who were happy to see you cross the stage and graduate, but little did they know that you would keep coming back, right? All of you. And some of you have been here before. I so appreciate it, and you coming back again. Appreciate your activism, appreciate you sharing. And I don't think they realized at that moment what you had accomplished. And I think one of the things that's so striking for me is maybe you not realizing how much that you accomplished. And I think for me, it's testament to one of the things I was really struck by when I interviewed at Williams, which would have been in about 2000, was that the student activism continued. I had been at another institution where every 4 years it kind of died out and had to start over again, and then it would die out, and then it would start over again. And one of the things I was so struck by here was that continuity in activism. Because the other thing that this really speaks to is how long it takes, right? And there were concrete achievements and outcomes from the 1993 hunger strike. It did not immediately lead to a program. There were some fits and some starts and some forward and some backwards, right? And it takes a really long time, and it takes really a lot of work. And so I want to really thank Vista, because doing this event also takes a lot of work. It has a lot of moving pieces. I know how many of you have participated in different ways, because I kept getting multiple emails from different places. All good. And I would also like to thank you, because I feel a little less like my students don't like me right now because they have a paper due on Monday. I didn't know. I didn't know the timing, but that emphasis on doing your work, and I know that when you all take on this kind of organizing and activism in your own ways, that you're doing that above and beyond all of the coursework and other things that you're doing as well. So a huge, huge recognition and thank you for Vista for continuing in so many ways the foundations that have been laid. Latinx studies absolutely grew on the foundation of student activism. It would not have happened here or anywhere else without the student activism over many, many, many years. It also takes a lot of work from faculty, and it is just a long, hard road. When I came in 2001, there were several things that came together that made that the beginning that continued, right, that resulted in the program that we have today. I had come from Rutgers University, New Brunswick, where I had already been a faculty member, and I had already been really struggling to build a Latinx studies program and a curriculum against all odds. It was not a supportive environment. And we were kind of chronically understaffed, under-resourced. So we existed, but we didn't have what we needed. And we could not thrive. And it was just a very, very difficult environment. And so when I got here and found that the college had sort of made a commitment to building a Latinx studies program but didn't really know what they were doing, it was an opportunity in a way because there was a commitment to it built on that student activism. It was a moment where the college had decided that we weren't going to teach 2-3 anymore. We were going to go to 2-2. And what that meant is they were growing the faculty. So what is usually cutthroat competition to get faculty lines eased up a little bit. Because we were growing the faculty, there was less competition for that. And it was also a moment when the college had decided that they needed to define what a concentration was. Because people were doing different things. It was a cluster, it was a concentration. It meant different things for all the units. So it was also a moment where that was coming together in a way that again made it possible to argue for the faculty that we needed and to really push alongside with students to get the faculty that we needed. But it still took us a few more years to have enough courses and enough faculty to be able to call it a concentration. But it really, I mean, it's just so inspiring to hear where this has come from. It still, our program still rests on the continued engagement and activism of students. And so this is just a moment for me to thank all of you. I'm super thrilled to be here. I'm super thrilled that we have faculty members here, that we have courses. I see Nellie in the back, so some of our other faculty members are here. Nellie Rosario. And you know, it's a great environment for us because it is more than one faculty. We do have more than, we have each other. You all have each other. Hopefully you all have each other. We have each other, and we all have each other together. And it's just a beautiful thing. So thank you so much.